everybody, good to see you. And some of you are new. We're so glad you're here. Some of you have been around a long time. We're glad, of course, you're here too. And I believe God has something for all of us. I think that's why we're here. Whether you know God or not, whether you're kicking the tires or been a long-time Christian, there's always a next step. And I hope let us know how we can be helpful in making that happen. So today, we are starting a new series on this called The Ugly Beautiful, talking about this Old Testament book called Ecclesiastes, written by Solomon. Solomon was one of the kings of Israel, actually the king of Israel at its height of power and prestige and wealth in the world. And it's a book where he, with all this almost unlimited wealth and power, tries everything and comes up with some conclusions about the ugly beautiful of life. And when you read Ecclesiastes, at first glance, I don't think it's anybody's favorite book when you first read it because it's a weird book. It's sometimes a depressing book. I think once you understand it, it could be a contender for a favorite book. But it's a little bit like schizophrenic multiple personality. Like, what are you? Because sometimes you feel the ugliness of the book. You feel futility and purposelessness and nothing matters and all. It's like dust in the wind, the song we just heard by Kansas. You know, dust in the wind, all we are is dust in the wind, nothing matters, that's all we are. And that's a very Ecclesiastes kind of song. But other times in the book, there's brightness and hope and joy and meaning and purpose. And it's like, enjoy life because God gave it to you, enjoy. And you're like, well, what am I supposed to do? And the answer is both. To enjoy the ugly beautiful and to flourish when it'd be very easy where most people flounder. And that's what we're going to be talking about in this series. And to understand that, we're going to use a couple of art forms. One is, this is kintsugi. You saw earlier on the video, which is a Japanese art form where you break pottery and then you take what's broken and you put it back together with gold or silver or platinum and make it more interesting, make it more beautiful than it was before it was ever broken. We'll come back to that. But to understand the ugly beautiful and the story that we find ourselves in the world, not just Ecclesiastes, we do have to understand that backstory. And to do that, I'm also going to use art because we'll never understand Ecclesiastes without understanding this. Art's going to help us. And a lot of you probably don't know that I'm not just a pastor, I'm also an artist. And I've done one piece of art, my first and last. This was 20-something years ago. Here it is, my self-portrait. Obviously, and I title it Jeff. And I've tried to sell it over the years in different campaigns for raising money for buildings, and nobody's ever bought it. I don't know what that's about. Maybe it just, we're only trying to raise like $20 million, and people think it's not enough. I don't know. But so I'm just telling you that, showing you that so you know I've got some chops, okay? I know what I'm talking about. Because this is a great, admittedly a great piece of art, a masterpiece, Leonardo da Vinci's Mona Lisa, arguably the most well-known piece of art in the world. And Leo is, he was good, but I think it could be better. So I'm just gonna work some improvements on the Mona Lisa because for one thing, you can't tell if she's happy or sad. It's kind of ambiguous, so we're just gonna make her happy. We'll give her some lipstick. See, it's better already. Just give her a little bit of happiness. And then, you look at her, and it looks like she should be holding something, but she's not. And so I'm going to put a baby there because babies make everything better. So here we go. Oh, yeah. Got to get baby feet. Got to love baby feet, little baby fingers. Diaper. Okay, there we go. Some hair. Okay, awesome. Isn't that better already? And then he makes it so bleak, and so let's, instead of a bleak weather, let's put some sunshine. And then if you do sunshine, she probably needs some sunglasses. So let me, now art takes time, people, so you gotta be patient. A lot of people don't know that about art. There we go. You want a hat? I think a hat, maybe it's Texas, so maybe a cowboy hat. Oh yeah, so much better. Now, isn't that just way better? And yeah, thank you. I'll sign it later. But you look at what I just did, and I've been, you can hear what people say from the state. Like I can hear sometimes people say, at every service, people are like, "Oh no, he's not." Like when I've taken a little bit of thing, y'all are actually like, "Okay, go for it," more than the other services. I don't know what that means, but when you look at this as a copy, right? That's one thing. But let's say I was able to get into the Louvre in Paris, where the Mona Lisa is. And I was able to get access to it with my little acrylic paint markers, and I made my improvements to the original Mona Lisa, right? I would become infamous. I'd be a hated person on the planet, right? Because how could you ruin a masterpiece? But that's the story we find ourselves in. We live in a ruined masterpiece. That's the story of the world. And therefore, if you live in our world, and you do, and wonder why it's not better, there's a good reason for that, because you and I were created for better. We were created for perfection. We just don't live in it. I mean, that is the story. Like, God created Adam and Eve, the first humans. They lived in the Garden of Eden. Everything was perfect. There was no disappointment. There was no brokenness in relationships. There was no misunderstanding. There was no violence. There was no injustice. There was only beauty and goodness and purpose and meaning and joy, no frustration. But then Satan comes with his spray paint and paint markers and convinces Adam and Eve, you know what, we can make this better. God is withholding stuff, like we can make this better. And when they chose sin, that changed everything. Paul talks about that in Romans 5. He says, sin entered the world through one man and death through sin. And goes on to explain how along with sin comes futility and frustration and difficulty. Because when mankind chose sin, when we rebelled against God, not just death, physical death, but destruction, disease, and deterioration, and brokenness, and broken relationships, and all the stuff we experience that we weren't supposed to experience happened. It's what the word Paul uses is the word frustration or futility. Later in Romans 8, he says, for the creation, all creation, was subject to frustration, futility, and by its own choice, not by its own choice, but by the will of the one who subjected it, human beings, we brought all of humanity in this place of frustration and futility. What does that mean, frustration, futility? We all live it. Like even good things in our world, they're still good. Like God created our world, there's goodness there. Just like with my changes to the Mona Lisa, underneath my changes is a masterpiece, is beauty. And underneath our world is all kinds of beauty. We experience that in our jobs and relationships and accomplishment and enjoying good things and all of that. It's like, it's great. And yet sometimes we feel the goodness of it, and sometimes it's just not great at all. Because futility is laced through all of it. So sometimes, like in our dating life or single life or married life or family life with kids, we feel joy and meaning. Other times we feel frustration and disappointment and pain. That's life in the ugly beautiful. In our work environments, we feel the same. Sometimes it's a great day and we're like, oh, I'm so blessed I get to do what I do. And other days it's like, I don't think I can do it another day. That's life in the ugly beautiful. And what we're going to talk about in this series, what Solomon is going to point us to, is how you and I can flourish in the ugly beautiful of life. How we can flourish even as we experience frustration and futility. It's not, oh, God's going to make everything perfect. We're not going to live in a perfect world until Jesus returns and makes it that way again. But in the meantime, how can we flourish in the ugly beautiful? So each week of this series, we're going to look at a different area of life that Solomon dives into. Relationships, accomplishment, like, your career, material things, enjoyment. He's going to look at all of that. And so we're going to dive into different areas of life. But this week is a little different. This week is the most important because it is a basic life orientation, a basic life decision to live a certain way that God invites us to live so that we can flourish, not in perfection, but in a world that is sometimes great and sometimes terrible, sometimes purposeful, sometimes it doesn't feel that way, sometimes joyful, sometimes joyless, but how we can flourish in all of it. So to do that, we're going to do two things today. We're going to look at the very beginning of the book in the first verses of Ecclesiastes. That's his premise about life on this planet. which is basically it stinks. And then we're going to see the conclusion. As he looks at all this stuff, we're going to jump to the end of the book to see the conclusion and to see, okay, there's something more to it than that will help us flourish in this world. So first, we start with the life stinks part, because and it's a lot like a song, the way he writes it. It's poetry, kind of like a blues song. You know, it's like bum 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 bum. Nobody loves me, bum 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 bum. I got no place to go, bum 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 bum. So just think of that as we're going through this, because if you came here to get all pumped up today at church, you came to the wrong church today. Because here we go. The words of the teacher, son of David, king in Jerusalem, Solomon. Meaningless, meaningless, says the teacher, utterly meaningless. Everything in this world is meaningless. See what I mean? Meaningless, meaningless. Everything is meaningless. Dust in the wind. The word translated meaningless from the original language of the Old Testament, which is Hebrew. Meaningless is a good translation, but it's a metaphorical translation to get to the meaning of it. But the literal word, though, is the word vapor, like water vapor, like a cloud. It looks like something, but if you try to grab hold of it, it's not much of anything, right? So he says everything is like that. Now picture clouds. Thinking of clouds, picture yourself like in some remote part of the world. Maybe, 100 years ago, and I can't go that far. Let's go 30 years ago in some part of remote Africa, and you've never been around other human beings outside your tribe, and you look up at the sky, and you love the sky, but you're always curious about these white things in the sky we call clouds. And you're also curious about these new birds that have come that are huge and make a lot of noise. And one day, one of those birds lands, and it's not a bird, it's an airplane. And out of that little airplane becomes this lady who is telling you about God. She's a missionary, and you get to know her a little bit, enough that when she invites you to fly with her in that plane and fly in the sky, it's a little scary, but you think, yeah, let's do it. And so you get in the cockpit next to the pilot, and she takes off, and you're in the sky, and you're a little nervous because you don't want to hit the clouds, those white things, right? But she knows that. She's not going to hit some clouds. She's a nice person. But what happens pretty soon is she looks like she's flying right into a cloud. And before you have time to shout out, no, don't do it, you run into a cloud, and it goes, what happens? No explosion, right? Just everything's fine. Because it's just a cloud. It looked like something, but it wasn't something. It's just vapor. And you look out the window, and it's just, you can kind of see water vapor and all that. And that's what Solomon is saying, is that life and parts of life in this planet, all the things that we look to for significance and meaning and to base our lives around on their own, they're just nothing once you get them. Life is meaningless. The blues song goes on. He's just getting started. What do people gain from all their labors at which they toil under the sun? We're going to hear that phrase a lot in Ecclesiastes, under the sun. And all that means is life on this planet in a fallen world that is partly good and partly laced with futility. So he says, what do people gain from all of our work, all of our labor, trying to make everything better and all that? And Solomon basically says, yeah, not a whole lot. He goes on, generations come and generations go, but the earth remains forever. He's saying that every generation, including ours, thinks we're the most important generation, that our problems are the biggest, that our opportunities are the greatest. Look how far we've come. We're amazing, or look how bad it is, or whatever. And Solomon says none of that even matters, because the truth is, our generation's going to leave this planet, and the planet is going to go on, and there'll be another generation, as if we were never here. Nothing matters. I told you this was going to be encouraging. And then he talks about the cyclical nature of things. Now, he's going to give 3 illustrations in nature to talk about the cycle. But what he's trying to get at is like the hamster wheel, right? The hamster who's working on the wheel and not getting anywhere. He says the sun rises and the sun sets and hurries back to where it rises. Every day the sun rises and the sun sets over and over again. Then he uses the illustration of the wind. The wind blows to the south and turns to the north. Round it goes, ever returning on its course. And then water, the water cycle. All streams flow into the sea, yet the sea is never full. To the place the streams come from, there they return again. All things are wearisome, more than one can say. He's talking about just the cyclical nature of life. Now think about this in your life, in my life, in our work, let's say a work week, just the way we live our lives. So let's say your work week starts tomorrow morning, Monday morning. And usually my alarm's set for 6:30. So let's just pretend that's what we're doing, okay? So 6:30 tomorrow morning, you ready for this? Alarm goes off. Beep, 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 beep. You're groggy, it feels way too early, but you get up because you have to. You go into the bathroom, get ready, maybe get dressed, brush your teeth, whatever you gotta do. Then you go get some coffee if you haven't gotten that already. And you get your coffee, try to get something to eat, that you get into the car. You get into the car, you begin your 30-minute, 20-minute, 40-minute, whatever it is, commute, fighting traffic until you get to where you work, whether that's an office or a hospital or a school or wherever it is you work. You finally, you get to work and you go in and begin your day. Maybe if it's an office, you log into your computer, you do some stuff at your desk, you have some meetings, you break a little bit for lunch, then you get back to your meetings, you get back to your teaching, you get back to your whatever it is that you're due. And then 6, 7 o'clock, you get back into your car, you do another 30-minute, 40-minute commute, fighting traffic back. Then you have to figure out something for dinner that you throw together. If you have kids, you got to get them to bed. You're exhausted, so exhausted that you decide just to watch a little TV before you go to sleep. And you do watch TV and you go to sleep without turning it off. And the next thing you know is you hear beep, 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 beep. And the next day, beep, 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 beep. The good news is 1 week out of the year, maybe 2 weeks out of the year, you interrupt that cycle and you go to the beach or you go to the mountains, but big whoop. Because every day is the same thing. That's what Solomon is saying. Again, don't you feel so great? So glad he came. He's just saying it's relentless. It's like nothing ever matters. And then he keeps going. He says, the eye never has enough of seeing, nor the ear its fill of hearing. We'll never see enough. We'll never hear enough. What has been will be again. What has been done will be done again. There's nothing new under the sun. Is there anything of which one can say, look, this is something new? It was here already, long ago. It was here before our time. Solomon is saying, I've lived life long enough. I don't get excited about new things anymore. New promises, new challenges, new whatever. The next new leader that's going to change everything. The next new idea that's going to revolutionize everything. The next new doomsday scenario that's going to doom everything. The next book about how Jesus is going to come next week. He's just like, I don't even worry about any of that anymore because there's nothing new. Nothing ever really changes in a substantive way. You feel the cynicism, right? The futility. But he goes on, makes it even more personal. No one remembers the former generations, and even those yet to come will not be remembered by those who follow them. Like you and I mean, maybe we feel important in our own little world, but Solomon is saying don't, because one day you're going to die and and nobody's going to remember you. I mean, think about that. Think about that with me. I'm pastor here. So let's say I step in front of a bus tomorrow and die and go to heaven. And what's going to happen? What would happen here? Well, there'd be a funeral probably at some point, a week or two, and there'd be a few people that say some nice things. But then they'd hire another pastor who would, I would think, do a great job. They would hire well and do really good stuff, and everything would be going pretty well. And in about 18 months, somebody might say, hey, you remember that guy that used to be here? What was his name? I think he was an Alabama fan or something, kind of goofy, and Chad. I think his name was Chad, Oh yeah, I kind of remember Chad. And then 18 months after that, you know what would happen? Not even Chad talk. Nobody would ever think about it. Nobody would ever remember. It was just, I was never here. And Solomon is saying, yeah, that's the way the world is. We think we're so important. We think there's so much meaning and purpose, but really it's just meaningless. That's pretty dark, right? He is in the ugly, beautiful of life. He's in the ugly. He is neck deep in the futility and frustration of life. Again, it's just life in this fallen world. He's feeling the fallenness of the world, what theologians call the curse. Remember Romans 8:20 that we looked at earlier? Paul talks about that. He says, for the creation was subjected to frustration. What Solomon is talking about, another way to translate that, futility, meaningless vapor. I'll come back to that. Not by its own choice, but the will of humanity who subjected it. This is a little geeky, little nerdness for those who like this kind of stuff. But the Old Testament written in Hebrew, New Testament written in Greek. But people like Paul and even Jesus quoted at times the Septuagint, which is the Greek translation of the Old Testament. So in Romans 8, when Paul talks about futility or frustration, he actually uses the Septuagint from Ecclesiastes, the Greek translation of the Old Testament of Ecclesiastes, and pulls out this really rare word that's used there to describe meaninglessness or vapor or purposeless, whatever you want to call what we just read in Ecclesiastes. And he uses that word to say, hey, you know what Solomon was talking about with all of his darkness in that blues song, ba-bum-bum-bum? That's our world because of sin. And that's the futility that runs in all of it. Another way to say that is life in a fallen world, life is a bumber, B-U-M-B-E-R. And you think, well, that doesn't make any sense. What's a bumber? Well, let me explain it to you. Because this is a common phrase, a common word we use in our house or phrase. We'll say, yeah, it's a bumber, or life is a bumber. And here's where that came from. So my roommate in college, for all 4 years of college, was from Korea. And therefore, English was his second language, and yet he had really great English. But English, especially American English, is difficult because we have so many inconsistencies, because we have so many influences. And therefore, it can be hard to get right because of all, like, for example, at night he might say, oh no, I forgot to brush my tooths. And I'd be like, John, no, it's teeth. He'd be like, oh, dumb English. And, or he would say, oh man, my foots are hurting. I'd be like, no, it's feet. Be like, why? Why does it have to be? Why in the foots, right? So anyway, the way bumber happened is we were supposed to go to a movie, and this was before cell phones. You couldn't just text. So he puts on our dorm door, unfortunately, he puts it in a public place where a lot of people saw it, and he said, Jeff, can't go to the movie. So sorry, life is a bumber. Instead of bummer, B-U-M-M-E-R, B-U-M-B-E-R. So everybody saw it. So when but people were saying, oh yeah, bumper and all that. And so when I got to him, he's like, why is everybody saying bumper? And I was like, because that's what you put. He said, no, I put bummer. I said, no, you didn't. You put bumper. It doesn't have a B. And he said, yes, it does. Like dumb and dumber, like has MB, bum and bummer, right? And I was like, no, sorry, but you have stupid English. I'd be like, I know. But ever since then, in our house, well, you'll hear us say when something bad happens, life's a bumper. If somebody hits a bad shot on a golf course, bumper if we behave. Or, whatever, it's just bumper. What Paul is saying, what Solomon is saying is in the fallenness of our world, life's a bumper often. And sometimes we feel the bumberness of life. It's not that it's all bad, because sometimes it's really good, but sometimes it's really not. And how do you navigate a world like that? A world where futility and frustration is everything. Does anything even matter? And Solomon is saying, I don't think anything matters. Now, if that's where the story ended, if that's where the book ended, if that's where the story of our world ended, it'd be a pretty depressing story. But it's not where Ecclesiastes ends up, and it's not where this world will end up. It's not where God wants our life to end up. Because he invaded our story. You and I broke our world and made everything terrible. Even though there's beauty underneath it, everything laced with futility. And God could have just said, well, good luck with that. But he didn't. He decided to intervene. He decided to give wisdom in his word. He decided to intervene by sending Jesus here to be a restorer and a redeemer and to bring beauty out of the ugly, beautiful. And that's why at the end of the book, you see that reflected, because the beginning is life stinks. That's the premise. But that's not his conclusion. His conclusion is, okay, life often stinks, but you can find meaning and purpose if you know this. And here it is, Ecclesiastes 12:13. Now that all has been heard, as he's looked at all these areas of life we'll look at, here is the conclusion of the matter. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the duty of all mankind. For God will bring every deed into judgment, including every hidden thing, whether it is good or evil. Saying life does matter because there's something bigger than just our life, and that's God. And God when he says fear God, it's not like be afraid of him, like, ooh, like a ghost or something. Fear God is another way of saying respect. Respect God enough to obey him, to realize that he's wise, that his ways are better, that he has, in this world that's often confusing, he has brought light and wisdom, and that if you and I are smart, then we'll live life in the ugly beautiful with him at the center of it, obeying what he told us to obey because he's good. Just a few verses earlier, Solomon said the same thing, just a little differently. He said, remember your Creator in the days of your youth, before the days of trouble come and the years approach when you'll say, I find no pleasure in them. So what Solomon is saying as an old man is, don't be like me, that I'm so old that I've wasted most of my life not realizing that God is, it's life is best when God is at the center of it. That I can follow God in the ugly beautiful into a realm of increasing joy and meaning and purpose and all that. Not in a perfect world, and not that any of it will be perfect, but I can find God in all of it, even the imperfection. And Solomon is saying, don't wait till we get old to figure that out. Remember God in the days of your youth. Because otherwise, we'll try to make sense of this world in all the wrong ways, or sometimes even we'll use good things and try to get too much out of them. And the thing about good things that God has injected into our world, whether it's relationships like family or marriage or parenting or career or accomplishment or doing good in the world or whatever, those are all good things. But on their own, they're pretty empty without God. They just don't get very far. Good things are good things. They just make bad gods. Another way to say that is a former acquaintance, I would say. I'm going to quote somebody who gives his kind of the point of Ecclesiastes, and I think it's so well done, I can't improve on it, so I'm going to quote him, but I'm not going to tell you his name because he has kind of gone off the rails. Not kind of, he's very much gone off the rails, and I don't want to share his name. You think, oh, that's such a good quote, and then you go look him up and start following him, and I just don't want to do that. And I know that's controlling, but oh well, you know? And if you really want to know who this is, you can email me, and I won't tell you. But he did when he was a little better off in some ways. Great point of Ecclesiastes. Here it is. On our own, we will put self at the center and make gods out of the good things on this planet. He offers a new and better way where we put self aside, place God at the center, and look to him for life and meaning. And when we do, all these good things fall into their proper place and become increasingly good. Unnamed pastor who's off the rails. That's exactly what's going on in Ecclesiastes. And that's why once you understand that, you see the bright spots of Ecclesiastes. Like in Ecclesiastes 9:7, which seems so weird when we've just read life is meaningless and all this. Because then he breaks in 9:7, he says, go, eat your food with gladness and drink your wine with a joyful heart. For God has already approved what you do. Always be clothed in white and always anoint your head with oil, that's how they dress for parties. He's saying just go in this world, always dress for a party. Be like a party on the way to happen because it's amazing. And he goes on, next verse, enjoy life with your wife, whom you love, all the days of this meaningless life that God has given you under the sun, all your meaningless days. For this is your lot in life, and in your toilsome labor under the sun, whatever your hand finds to do with all your might. He's saying life is meaningless and terrible, and it stinks. So enjoy the heck out of it. And you're like, well, what? And that's life in the ugly beautiful. It's how can we enjoy life in this fallen, broken world that has goodness in it and yet futility in it too. And through all of it, once we understand that, and if we can cling to God and follow him into this new life, we really can build something way better and more significant and meaningful than we ever would on our own. And so today is a really important day. For all of us, I don't care where you're at with God, whether you know God or don't, whether you're kicking the tires of Christianity or been a Christian a long time, it's an opportunity to say, hey, what am I really looking to for life and joy and purpose and meaning? It's easy to fool ourselves in a world like this. And for some of you, I mean, we're all at different places. For some of you, when you really think about that honestly, it might be, hey, you know what? Life's actually pretty good without much of God in my life, or maybe no God at all. Like I've kind of got it going on. I've got the job I want. I've got the car I want. I've got the family I want. I've got the house I want. It's not perfect, but it's pretty good. And that's a dangerous place to be. Because again, good things are good. God gave them to us. They just make bad gods. And eventually, you'll figure that out. But what Solomon is saying is often for people who experience success or experience that's the most dangerous, because like Solomon, they don't figure out until way later in life of like, oh man, all that stuff, honestly, it's not that big a deal. It's just vapor. And Solomon is saying, man, don't wait for that. Find God in all of it. Don't just live a shallow life. Allow God to take you into a depth of purpose and a depth of joy and a depth of connection with him. Others be like, hey, I can't relate to that. Everything's good. Because right now you feel the futility of life. Maybe all of your life, or maybe it's just a part of your life. Frustration, disappointment, hurt. Maybe in a relationship. Maybe in your career, maybe in finances, maybe in just your own emotional well-being or whatever. And you feel the futility in a fallen world. You feel the disappointment. You feel the hurt. And what do you do when you, like Solomon, are neck deep in that? Well, there's some options. One thing you can do is deny them. Just live in denial. Act like everything's okay, even though you know it's not okay, and put a facade out there for everybody to see. Kind of the North Dallas facade of everything's great for us. And yet it's not, and you know that, but it's hard to admit that. Or escape. And by escape, I don't mean just go to Borneo. You could, but I'm talking about like escape pain and futility in ways that are not helpful, that are counterproductive. Things that we do that in the short run may make us feel a little bit better, numb the pain, but don't make us better in the long run. Could be drinking too much, doing other kind of substances, could be pornography, could be other sexual stuff outside of where God has designed it to be. It could be workaholism, or there's lots of options, just numbing ourselves with reels or whatever, just escape. You can also replace. Just move on to the next thing. Yeah, this marriage, not good, but the next one, it's gonna be awesome. And it may take you a few times to figure out, there's futility in all of it. The next job, the next church, the next relationship, the next friendship, the next team, the next school, the next whatever. And it's okay to change things if they're bad. I'm not saying that, but we'll never escape futility. We've got to learn in the ugly beautiful to find God wherever God's placed us. Another opportunity is the one that Solomon is talking about, and this is Jesus's words, follow. Meaning follow him. That's his invitation to you and me, by the way. It's not just, hey, believe in a few things and check off, you get to go to heaven. That's true, but it's really, hey, not just believe a couple things, but follow me into a whole new way of life. A life with God at the center, of increasing meaning and joy and purpose, even in the midst of imperfection. Jesus said in John 10:10, I have come that they may have life and have it to the full. Jesus came to bring restoration and redemption and goodness into our life that we could never get on our own in this fallen, broken world. He's like, follow me into a whole new life. And that's what I hope all of us will do. And to evaluate, where am I right now in light of that invitation? You know, Carrie Livgren, who wrote Dust in the Wind that we sang earlier, or Wendy sang earlier, we'll hear at Legacy. Dust in the Wind, Carrie Livgren of Kansas wrote that song. Kansas got pretty big, And then something happened to him. He found Jesus. He became a Christian because he realized he had gotten everything, like the dog who catches the car, everything he wanted, and thought, who cares? And in that process, was able to find something way above all of that stuff that actually does bring meaning, connection with God. In fact, I remember shortly after he became a Christian, they did a concert where I grew up in Huntsville, Alabama. On a Saturday night, they did a concert. On Sunday, I'm in church with our youth group, and Carrie Livgren and 2 members of the band come and sit behind us. And it was like, I don't remember what the sermon was, but I do remember that. It was like, wow, it was really cool. And then found out, oh yeah, he became a Christian and all this. Another thing, when I think about this, there was a celebration Thursday. Because some are like, okay, yeah, my life could be more meaningful. But some are in a place right now, I know, where you're like, no, my life's broken. Like it's not really cute or funny. Like my life's broken, and I don't think it's beyond, I think it is beyond repair. And it's not. Because Jesus is a redeemer. He's a restorer. He's a savior. He's good at it. He's all powerful. So Thursday, I helped celebrate a little bit an anniversary. And that anniversary was a significant one. It was like 38 years of marriage, which is great. But it was a marriage that almost ended because 2 years ago, he had an affair. And brought a lot of turmoil and having an affair, but also a pastor, which means he's not doing that anymore, and all kinds of confusion and pain and all of that. And it looked like it wasn't gonna, it was a broken thing that was gonna fall apart, and it could have. But like the kintsugi, God can take the broken pieces and put them together in a way that's better. And that's what we were celebrating Thursdays. They decided to fight through it. They decided to work through it. It was really difficult. But what we were celebrating is they really do have a better marriage now than if the affair had never happened. I'm not saying go have an affair. That's my marriage advice. That's not the point. But God's just a redeemer and a restorer. Now, they could have made the other decision and each gone their separate ways. And I know those two, and you know what they would have done? They would have eventually also found God's redemption and healing and purpose and moved on and been better. That's God. I'm glad it worked the way it did. But sometimes it doesn't. It doesn't mean that's the end either. It's just an opportunity for some kintsugi, for God to bring beauty out of brokenness. So I don't know where you're at in all this, but I want to give you and me the opportunity to go to God and just say, God, in light of, in the ugly, beautiful of life, think, God, in my brokenness or in my shallowness or in my pain or in my frustration, just to come to him and ask him to help us follow him into what he wants for us in a new way. Let's bow our heads together in prayer. As I always say, prayer is just talking to God in our own words. He's our Father. He loves you. You don't have to impress him or anything. That doesn't matter. He just loves you. And for some of you, this may be an opportunity for the first time to say, God, I want a relationship with you. And that's why Jesus came. He came to make that possible. We don't have to wonder if there's a God who cares about us. He came to make it possible for us to know him. And everything he offers as a gift. We just simply say thank you. We don't deserve anything. It's not about getting your act together. We can't. Just saying, God, I know I don't have my act together. I need you. Would you come in, begin to not just certainly forgive me, but also heal me and transform me. Help me walk into this new life that you want for me. For others, maybe have a relationship with God. It's an opportunity just to say, yeah, what am I just going through life shallow right now? God, don't let me do that. Or some are devastated or frustrated or discouraged. And saying, God, would you move into that brokenness with your redemption, with your restoration, with your healing, with your strength? Would you make something beautiful out of the ugly that I'm going through right now? And help me hang in there. Father, thank you that you came in this broken world of the ugly beautiful that we may have life and live it to the full. And would you help us increasingly live into that hope? In Jesus' name, amen. So we're gonna sing a song, which we often do in worship to God and to bring our hearts and our minds to him. And this one's so perfect for this because it's Lord, turn it around. Because with whatever is going on in our life right now, he really is a turnarounder, a redeemer, a restorer. And so let's stand and honor him together.